Welcome. As we journey through the history of modern India, we come to a real turning point. Today, we're not going to look at the Great Uprising of 1857 itself. Instead, we're going to explore what happened after. We'll see how this one single event completely changed the course of Indian history, really marking the end of one era and the beginning of something very different. To really get a handle on the changes that came later, you have to appreciate just how huge this event was. The uprising of 1857, well, it was a massive shock to the British. I mean, think about it. You have a trading company that had somehow become this huge power, and then suddenly it's facing this massive widespread rebellion. It was a moment that shook the very foundations of their rule and forced them to completely rethink their entire approach to India. So, what was the biggest consequence? The most immediate one? It was this massive shift in how India was governed. And this wasn't just a small change in policy. No, this was a complete and total transfer of power, from a private company directly to the British Crown itself. Now, this is a really crucial point, so let's just take a second here. For more than 100 years, the day-to-day running of India wasn't in the hands of the British government. It was run by a private company, a corporation driven by profit. So the end of the company's rule is a huge moment. It's the official switch from commercial control to direct formal empire. It's so important to understand this difference. You see, the East India Company, it started as just a business, a trading venture with a royal charter. But over time, through clever deals, military force, and politics, it took over huge territories, built its own army, and basically ran large parts of the subcontinent. So before 1858, India wasn't technically a colony of Britain. It was the property of a private company. The revolt just made it brutally clear how unstable and dangerous that arrangement really was. And here, you can see that new power structure really clearly. Notice that authority no longer comes from a company boardroom in London. It flows directly from the British Parliament and from Queen Victoria herself. The title of the top official in India also changed, and this is a big deal. The Governor-General, who worked for the company, was replaced by the Viceroy. Now, the word Viceroy literally means in place of the monarch, showing that this person was the Queen's direct personal representative. Okay, so once the British Crown had this new direct control, what was the first thing they did? Well, their first job was to try and calm things down, to pacify the Indian rulers and the people. And they did this with a famous announcement, the Queen's Proclamation of 1858. This was a very carefully written document. It was designed to address the very fears and problems that had caused the uprising in the first place. This proclamation was a really smart piece of political strategy. You see, every single promise was a direct answer to a specific fear. Honoring treaties, that was to calm down the princes who felt the company was just grabbing land. The general pardon, that was a way to try and end the fighting. And the promise not to interfere in religion and customs, well, that was a direct response to the widespread belief that the British wanted to destroy Indian culture. And that last point, about government posts, was a small gesture toward a more cooperative future. Now, of all those promises, getting rid of the Doctrine of Lapse was maybe the most important one for the Indian princes. This policy, which had been used so aggressively, basically said that if a ruler died without a son to inherit the throne, his kingdom would just be taken over by the British. This is how states like Satara and Jhansi were annexed, and it created so much anger and insecurity among the ruling class. So by ending this policy, the crown was sending a message. Things were going to be more stable now, more respectful. But it wasn't all about making promises. Alongside this softer approach, the British made some very hard-headed, practical changes to their military. And these reforms, well, they weren't about friendship. They were all about control. The main goal was brutally simple: to make sure that a rebellion like 1857 could never, ever happen again. And the thinking here was really simple and direct. Before 1857, Indian soldiers, or sepoys, outnumbered British soldiers by a huge margin. And that's a big reason why the revolt was so successful at first. So after 1858, they made sure to increase the number of British soldiers. But even more importantly, look at the second point. The most powerful weapons, the heavy guns, the artillery, that was now going to be exclusively in British hands. This was their insurance policy. Even if Indian soldiers rebelled again, they wouldn't have the heavy firepower to truly challenge British rule. Okay, so let's just pause for a second and connect all these dots. We've talked about a transfer of power, a proclamation full of promises, and a big reorganization of the army. Let's try to get a clear mental picture of how one thing led to the next, like a chain of events. So here's the bottom line. The shock of the revolt was the trigger. It directly caused the end of the East India Company's rule and the beginning of the British Raj. The Crown then used a two-part strategy. On one hand, the velvet glove of promises to calm people down, and on the other, the iron fist of military control to make sure they stayed in power. This dual approach of promises and power, that really marks the true beginning of a new kind of British Empire in India, a more formal, direct, and powerful one. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. The aftermath of 1857 wasn't really an ending. It was a new beginning. This change, from a company's territory to a formal empire, completely changed the relationship between Britain and India. It created a new system of government, sure, but it also created a new kind of resistance, a new nationalism that would grow and change over the next 90 years, eventually leading to independence. So the question that's left hanging is, how did this new system, born from such a violent rebellion, end up shaping the India that was yet to come?